Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Excel Together. This week we're going to be talking about my 3 favorite functions in VBA. The first one being what's called a worksheet function, where we can use an actual function inside of Excel, like a cell that we would use. We can use that inside of VBA. The next one we're going to talk about is finding the last row inside of our worksheet. So if we had a giant list of values in one column, and we need to be able to find that last row of data used, we're going to figure out how to do that with just one simple line of code. And the last one being a for loop, but stepping backwards. Okay, so if you haven't watched my for loop video, I would recommend going back and watching that and then coming back to this one, because stepping backwards in a for loop actually has some unique capabilities that you can't normally do within a regular for loop. So let's go ahead and get started, okay? Worksheet functions, finding the last row inside of a worksheet, and then for loops backwards. All right, so let's get started. My 3 favorite VBA functions that you guys have to learn, okay? As I mentioned, we're going to be doing the worksheet function. We're going to find the last row inside of a column of data, and then we're going to do a for loop looping backwards, okay? So we got a lot to learn in this short video, so make sure you guys are paying attention. Pause the video if you need to. We're going to go quick here, okay? So for the first thing we're going to do, we're going to set up a scenario where we need to find the column age, okay? So obviously in this scenario it's D through D. So let's say we write a module that says, hey, go loop through column D, but then you go to it the next day and the age column is in column B. Well, then your VBA code is screwed up and it doesn't work, okay? So what we need to do is actually find the column where age is in the header, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to use a worksheet function, okay? So we're going to call our variable age match. We're going to say application.worksheet function.match. And I like to use trim and lowercase on it just because, you know, we don't want to be searching for the word age where a capital A is there one day and then lowercase a the next day. So I like to do trim to remove any leading or trailing spaces, and then also the lowercase. So we're going to add trim lowercase, and we're going to find the word age. Okay, so close parenthesis, and we're going to find this word in the active sheet dot range 1 through 1, which is the row that we're looking in. Okay, and we're going to close the parenthesis. Perfect. So now, if we step through this, remember I talked in the previous videos, to step through your code line by line, use F8 on your keyboard. That way you can see variable values. So if we step through this one, you can see age match equals 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. So if we take this and we drag it over here, and we step through here, age match now equals 2, because it knows that it's in column B. Perfect. So now what we need to do is we need to convert the column number to a letter so that we can reference that column. So we're going to say our next variable, age location, equals split. We're going to do cells 1, comma, age match, which is our first variable. We're going to close that parenthesis, dot address. We're going to say true, false, close parenthesis, comma, $sign, okay, and then 0 in the end. Okay, so that I know that was a lot. Pause this if you need to, study this. So we're going to step through this, and when we step through this, now we have age location equals D. Okay, so age match is 4, age location is D. So let's change this column again. So let's put it in column B, and we'll step through here again, and boom, column B now. Perfect. So now we have, no matter where this age column is, as long as the word age is in the first row, we can find that column, okay, without hard coding our column value. So we don't have to say, hey, go look in column D for the ages. Well, now we can say, hey, go look for wherever our variable says age is at. Okay, perfect. So now my next, that was favorite number 1. Absolutely extremely powerful. Love it. Especially when you don't know the kind of data that you're going to be getting that's going to be tried and true. It's going to be the same every single time. We want to try to eliminate any guessing or any hard coding that we're in our VBA here. Okay, so next one, finding the last row of data. So let's say, for example, we create a for loop and we need to loop through every single value that's there, but we don't know how many rows are going to be there. Well, we want to set our for loop to go to the very last row instead of hard coding like 10,000 in there, you know, because then you're just wasting time and it's looping through things it doesn't need to loop through. So we're going to find the last row here. So we're going to say last row equals active sheet dot cells active sheet dot rows dot count. Okay, we're going to look in column A to get the last row in column A dot end Excel up close parenthesis dot row. Okay, so if we step through this again, last row 134. So if we scroll down, boom, sure enough, last row is 134. So now, like I said, if we wanted to create a for loop, for example, we can set our end of our for loop to this variable. So it'll know, hey, this time we got to loop through this thing 134 times because we have 134 rows. So very powerful. Like I said, you know, if we were creating a for loop like this, we'll say 10,000 or 100,000 because we don't know how many rows to loop through. This is a hard-coded value. So the day that there is 100,001 rows, it's going to miss one row. Or if there's 10 rows, it's going to continue to iterate everything to 100,000. So it's completely unnecessary. So now what we can do is we can substitute this 100,000. We can take this last row variable and plop it into there. So now it's going to go for x equals 1 to last row. So it knows exactly how far to go. So, which brings us to the next point. My favorite, number 3, looping backwards. Okay, so this loop here is looping, I would call forwards, right? So we're going to loop from column, let's say we're just looping through column A here. It's going to start on row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, and all the way down to the last row, okay? But let's say, for example, we needed to set a condition to where, let's say the age is less than, we'll say 20. If it's less than 20, we need to delete the row entirely. Well, if we set a for loop up to do that, and we loop through this way, when it finds a row, it's going to delete it, and then it's going to move to the next row. So if I delete row 6 here, it's going to shift everything up, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to be skipping rows, not intentionally, but when you delete an entire row, it'll skip that row. So what we need to do is we need to actually loop backwards. So we need to start from the bottom of the list and then loop back up to the top. Because if our x value, our loop iteration, is at 134 and it needs to delete this row, it'll delete it and then it'll go to 133 and it won't skip that row, okay? So we're going to loop backwards and we're going to set a condition inside of our for loop. So in order to do that, we need to write the for loop backwards. So in order to do that, we need to say for x equals, well, instead of starting at 1, we want to start at the end and we want to go to row 2. Okay, so for x equals the last row, which I believe was 134, to row 2, I want you to determine if the age is less than 20. And if it is, we're going to delete that row completely. So we're going to say if the active sheet dot range, and then here we're going to incorporate our age location variable. Okay, so we're going to say age location. Okay, because normally what you would do is you would do, column D, which is hard coding. But in here, we're going to reference our variable up top. We're going to say age location and our x value. Okay, so our x value is the current loop iteration that we're in. If the value is less than 20, then I want you to take the active sheet dot range, age location again, and x dot entire row dot delete. Boom. Okay, so that was a lot there. So let me step back here. First thing we did was we set a variable to get the age location. Okay, so if this is in column B, it'll work. If it's in column D, it'll work. If it's in column Z, it'll work. Then we determined the last row. Okay, so we need to figure out how many iterations we need to work through in our for loop. So we determined our last row. And then we created a backwards for loop. And I've missed a very important step here, and I apologize for this. In order to work backwards, we need to add step minus 1. Okay, I can't believe I missed that. The most important part of looping backwards, step minus 1. That tells the for loop, hey, we're working backwards. Okay, so we got our age location, we got our last row, and now our for loop is going to start at the last row, go up to row 2, and if the age is less than 20, we're going to delete the entire row. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here because we're going to be starting down here. So we're going to step through here. We got our age location, column D. Our last row is 134. Perfect. Now we're going to say if this value here is less than 20, we want to delete the entire row. This one's 25, so it should not delete this row, hopefully. And it did not. Okay, so our next one, 6, it is less than 20. So when I step through this, it should go over to here, and it did. It highlighted this, and watch this row disappear. Bam. Perfect. Now we're on row, what are we on? 132. So we're not skipping any rows like we would if we were going forward with our for loop. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just execute this by hitting play, and bam, we have everything. Everybody over the age of 20 is left here. So perfect. So I'm going to go ahead, just for your guys' sake, this is number 1 of my favorite. This is number 2. And this is number 3 here. Okay, so number 1, using a worksheet function to find the column header that we're interested in. Using active sheet last row, Excel up, to get the last row in our data set, and then using a for loop looping backwards to delete rows and not skip any rows that we're interested in evaluating. So these are my absolute 3 favorite for sure. Very powerful. They can all do so many things. They're extremely important if you guys want to become fluent in VBA. Definitely need to learn these. So awesome. So next week, I think we're going to talk about a few other favorites of mine. They're not my top 3, but they are absolutely important to learn. So great. I hope you guys learned something. We'll see you next week. See ya.